Hello everyone. My name is Daniel, and I'm here to talk about the playful possibilities you can have when you make games without a game engine. And this is a talk that I also did at GDC last month, with some slight variation. So I adjusted it to this Nordic Game Jam. And I just want to start with a small disclaimer. As you maybe can hear, I do have a bit of a stutter, and I do promise I'm not doing it on purpose to keep you in here longer, but you can just see it as it's my way of adding dramatic pauses to my speech. It says here on my title card that I'm a sound artist. That's a title that I have taken on to me. But as it probably is with many of you in here, you are used to wearing many different shaped hats. I'm, for instance, also a sound designer. I like to design sounds. I'm a composer for video games and for movies. I'm also a saxophonist. I play over 100 saxophone gigs per year, so that's my double life than game audio. I'm also a maker of games in Wwise, but more about that later. But most importantly, I'm a guy who likes to create cheesy transitions in PowerPoint. So you're going to see a lot of those in the next 30 minutes. When I started out, then I was pretty sure that my career path would look something like this. It would be pretty straightforward. I want to be a jazz saxophonist. So I thought if I would practice a lot, spend a lot of time, I would make a great success. So I can say, look, Mom, I made it. But in reality, it maybe looks a bit more like this. There has been a lot of twists and turns and ups and downs in my career, as it probably is with many of you here, where I have taken different paths that I was thinking of. And the biggest twist for me was when I found out that audio could be interactive. Like music could not only be from A to B, but it could be from like A to C to D to all the way around. So when I discovered game music and game audio, that's where I really found my passion. And now I'm actually working actively in the game audio industry, so I can proudly say, look, Mom, I made it to something completely else that I planned for. But that's also okay. And it's this completely else that I'm here to talk about today. I want to talk about how I have contributed to multiple game projects from AAA games, but also to small scope games, and especially game jam games, which I will have a special focus on here today. I'm going to talk about the creative approaches that I have taken in this game and what they have in common. And for me, game development is great to work in because everyone has a voice in it. Like you collaborate closely with artists, programmers, designers, narrative people, and probably a lot more that I forgot to mention here. It's a close collaboration of teamwork, which I really love. And it creates this magnificent interdisciplinary field. And when I first discovered game audio, then I knew that I wanted in on the action, but I didn't know anyone in the industry. So I started attending all kind of events, spilbar and events, workshops. But the most fun for me has always been the game jams. Participating in a game jam is pretty much like a crash. It's pretty much like a crash course in game development. Like it's thrilling. It's filled with junk food. Everything else in life fades away as you crunch for 48 hours straight. And just like real game development, then you completely forget about audio until 1 hour before deadline. And despite the chaos, then I really think that Game Jam is a really fun and amazing opportunity to push yourself and to experiment with something that you are not that used to doing. So I'm gonna show some of the wild and crazy things that I have been doing at game jams, especially Nordic Game Jams, where I have been eating junk food and crunching. There was one game jam at the Nordic Game Jam Online 2020, where I decided to disassemble my saxophone. Like it's one of my saxophones. I have more, and I can just assure that like nothing is lost when this saxophone was assembled. It doesn't sound that great. It looks beautiful, but it kind of sounds like well, it looks like a unicorn, but sounds like a donkey. Or it could be like a beautiful sunset, sounds like a car crash, pretty much. It's a cheap saxophone, but beautiful, so it was time to take it into pieces. So what I did was I found an app on my iPhone, so I could 3D scan the parts. I put it into Unity. I managed to make a ragdoll out of it, so you can imagine like this one is maybe the leg of a character, and some of the round pieces is the head and the arms, so it kind of built some joints. So I made everything from the saxophone, and of course then also sampled all the sounds from the saxophone. Not this saxophone because it doesn't sound great, but my good saxophone. And then I turned it into a game. And that was also a great collaborative experience. Here we see my girlfriend and me. We turned it into an art piece that we hang up on our wall afterwards. Yeah, so that turned out great. Also had a really great collaboration with a programmer who really saved my ass 2 hours before deadline because there was some critical bugs in my game. So shout out to Olmo if he's in there somewhere in the cloud, maybe watching this. And here's how it looks like. It turns out to be this psychedelic experience where the whole level is made out of a saxophone, and I forgot to make any gameplay, so it's pretty much just a walking simulator. And it's pretty broken, but yeah. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. But it was really fun, and it actually did get an award that was called "What the fuck is this art?" Which I'm extremely proud of. Like that's the best award that I have ever gotten. And if you want to play the game, then it's on itch here. Yeah. And I really like Nordic Game Jam because it really opens up for a lot of creativity and possibilities to do all these kind of crazy stuff. One other game jam that I really like is one called Level 1 Game Jam. How many has heard of Level 1? There's some people. It's a smaller game jam. I don't think it's running anymore. It used to be on ITU, I think. So the thing about Level 1 is like there's no competition. You don't have to win what the fuck is this art prize or anything else. You just have to go and have fun with what you're doing, basically. So it's a really friendly game jam, which I really like. So I also think it was 2020 or 2019 where I challenged myself to make a game that didn't have a game engine. So I decided to make a game in Reaper. So how many of you know what Reaper is? Okay, so there's a lot of people who doesn't know what Reaper is. So it's audio software where it's designed to make sound effects and music in it. So you have these tracks where you normally have some stems with some voices, and then you record sounds, you manipulate it, and then you put it into the game. But I found out when I was changing my keyboard shortcuts that I like to use the arrow keys to move some media blocks around, and then thought to myself, wait a minute, but that's almost a game. I have the controls for a game. I can move things around. So that's when I decided I can actually make a game out of this. So that's what I did in 48 hours. So you have this green block here, that needs to collect all the purple and the brown boxes here, the media items. If you collect the purple ones, then you move faster. If you collect the brown ones, then you get slower, but then you get less points out of it. And if you stumble into the black boxes, then it's game over, and then you die. And the aim is to not get caught by this evil timeline here. I call it the creeper. So you pretty much have to navigate through all of this level here. And this game is a great example of how I found out how audio is down prioritized. I forgot about making sounds for it until the last hour. So it sounds like shit. It's some basic synthesizers inside of Reaper that I just put into it. What's fun about it, all the levels are procedurally generated as well. So it creates a level at runtime per random by placing these blocks here. So here we can hear that we are close to the finish line. So it's like victory music. Yeah. And here we have the end section, like it's more like a closed level. And then I made some fun things where I can make the black squares like dance around in a way, so it seems chaotic, but it actually kind of controls. There's a bit of a bug here. It should open an image, but it's a bit delayed. And when you enter, then you get an image that says zero. Thank you. I wrote a blog post on how all the technical details is. I didn't use any scripting at all here, but I just used some custom action and some macros to do it. And a lot of hacking and creativity, really. And in the same vein that I jumped into game jams without any further knowledge, then I reached out to a composer who worked with constraint in the same way that I did. It's a composer who famously recorded a whole soundtrack through a human skull, and that guy's name is Martin Stig Andersen. He has worked on Inside, which is this game. He has also made Limbo. He has been working on Control, Tomb Raider, and some other games. So he's a big shot name. So many years ago, then I reached out to him. I pretty much just texted him and said, "Hey, do you need any help? I would be happy to assist you and just help as much as I can." And he replied back, said no, basically. But then around 6 months later, then we met at a bar, and then he said, "I might have something for you now. Just to be aware that you have to do a lot of tedious, repetitive tasks, and it might not be as fun." So I said yes immediately, and that game turned out to be Wolfenstein Youngblood, which was awesome. And I'm not here to talk about the full extent of the game, but I'm here to talk about how I work with the game. So here you can see how my work progress. It's pretty much putting floppy disk in an old sampler from the 80s, because his constraint was he would only use hardware from the 80s. So that means it took a long time to manipulate and reamp and use the sounds, because like this floppy disk, it can only have 5 seconds or something like that, and it has 12-bit audio, which is like a low quality, and I had hundreds of sounds that need to go through this machine here. But I did manage to make some kind of workflow that turned it into a bit speedy sessions. And if you're interested, this sampler is called Roland S330. And this process of putting constraints in front of you, it reminds me of an exercise that you often see in improv comedy, where you have to say yes and, So the idea is that you do some improvisation theater and comedy, but you have to say yes to what the previous actor is doing, so you can never say no. So if one actor say, "We are now driving a car made of vegetables," you have to say, "Yes, and the wheels are made of tomatoes." It could also be, "Are you gonna be speaking at the Nordic Game Jam?" "Yes, I am, and I'm also gonna include as many cheesy transitions as I absolutely can." And in a more practical sense, it could be, what if we sample these sounds a few notes lower to hear how it sounds like? And Martin would usually say yes, and try also to sample the sounds an octave below, 2 octaves below, try to sample them 6 octaves below, go to the extremes to see how that sounds. So it was a really playful process where I got some tedious task, but I was free to experiment a lot. And that's also what I did. I tried a lot of things out, and the one time I made a mistake because I was taking the sounds from my computer to the sampler, then back again, and it didn't forgot to turn off the monitoring, so that caused a feedback loop. So the sounds going out were also coming in and getting louder and louder and louder, creating this chaos. But actually it sounded pretty good because of this old hardware they used, and it had this glitchy, cool effect on it. Then I told Martin about the sounds I made, and I also showed him what I made, and he encouraged me to experiment further, and he said, "Why not use these guitar pedals that I have some delay, some reverb, and some compression, have a lot of crazy things. Try to add that to the effect chain to see how that sounds." And I did. I got some really awesome sounds from it. I don't have them still, and they didn't make it into the game, but it was a really fun learning experience nevertheless. But I do want to show you how the whole, like how some of the music sounds with this 80 constraints. So this is some of the sounds going through the 80 sampler. Yeah. And some years later, then Martin asked if I want to be a part of a new project, and then I knew what I was going into with this whole philosophy. That project was Back4blood, and I'm proud of have an IMDb credit as a sound artist. That's where I said, sound artist, I kind of like to bring to that. I'm just going to call myself a sound artist from now on. I don't know what it is, but it sounds pretty cool. The next section here is going to be a bit about Back4blood. I'm not going to go into full depth about the music in it. I would recommend to see Martin's TDC talk about it that he did in March. It's probably going out in YouTube in 3, 4, 5 months or something like that. It's great. But I do want to talk about how I approached it and what my role was in it. And then he also stuck with more cheesy transitions here. So what Martin did, it pretty much sounded like an old heist movie. How he presented the task. Like if you imagine this Danish movie Olsenbanden, where there's the 3 silly criminals that need a lot of random objects for their heights. That was kind of the same that Martin said. He said, "I want you to take this sink top. I wanted to put it in your bathtub, and that's pretty much going to be the soundtrack of the game." That's how it sounded like in my ears, at least. And then in the creative process, then I learned to say yes, and let's run the sounds through my oven. Let's use that as an amplifier. Why not take a 5-meter long spring to get some natural spring reverb, and why not record all of it in a local scout center? And speaking of heist movies, I got this huge sync top from Martin, and it was way too big to actually go through my front door, so we had to maneuver it up on our balcony here, and then we had to take it into a balcony door, so it also just lived in a balcony when we didn't use it for a long time. It was huge. There was a lot of loud sounds from it, so my neighbors loved it, and my girlfriend loved it. Everyone loved it. In this process, we are dealing with 3 things here, like what I like to call the recording, reamping, and rebring, which, at least for me, are the 3 pillars of the creative process here. For instance, in the next clips, then I'm going to show how I sampled some sounds from the bucket inside my bathtub. I got a hydrophone, which is a microphone that only works in water, and also got a surface speaker, a transducer. So I put the surface speaker on the sink top so that would resonate, that would function as a speaker, and then I would fill it up with water. I would also fill my bathtub up with water, and then I would record the sound from that. And that sounds something like this. There we go. So this large impact sounds. Yeah. Yeah, so this was day in, day out for weeks. And this is my very shady setup here. Things probably went wrong. But to this day, I actually think that I only got the gig because he knew I had a bathtub. Pretty convinced of that.
Were you able to still take showers?
No. No, there was a process if we needed to do that. Then I needed to say to my girlfriend, you cannot use the bathroom for the next 3-4 hours. And here's a video of a session from the Scout Center. So where we had a really nice, fun jam session. We can see here Katrine Amsler, which is one that I can give a huge shout out to. She is amazing. She built her own instruments. Like in the corners, you can see have a home-built guitar that she made, electrical guitar, and she has the 5-meter long spring. She's the one that came up with the ideas with the spring, by the ways. And here she's playing on a normal guitar with a bow, and then we're running these sounds into an acoustic guitar. So there's some speakers on this acoustic guitar with some microphones as well. And then we also use the oven as an amplifier, because I found out when I had this transducer, the surface speaker at home, then I was just testing on different kind of surfaces. Then I found out what sounds great. Is it like a wooden table? No, that's too much absorption here. Like some kind of metal would sound good. Then I for fun tried to put it in my oven, and then I got this thunder roaring back. It sounded really, really great. So we did a lot of jamming with that, and that's when I got the idea to, okay, so let's not annoy my neighbors too much. Let's find a place where we can do it in quiet. Click in. There we go. I'll turn the volume a bit up here. Yeah, there's some fantastic sounds coming up from that by using the oven as an amplifier, pretty much. You get this natural overdrive to the sound. Yeah, so that was really fun. By embracing this yes and approach, as I call it, this creative constraint, but being really positive towards it, you get a sense of creative freedom where ideas are built on top of each other. Like, we could not have be going to the oven amplifier if it was not a safe space for these creative freedom. Everything was allowed. There was complete anarchy when we were recording things, but then we were processing things afterwards. Then there was a strict protocol to follow. So there was this pattern between anarchy, chaos, and controlled environment, which actually mirrors the game loop in Back4blood, that you're out shooting zombies with some co-op people, you're just blasting, it's completely messy out there, then you go back to the camp, then you reiterate plan. So I think that Martin did that process on purpose with the game to really mirror how the game was, because I actually worked out awesomely to have this structure to it. And I think I have some sounds here. Yeah, so this is pretty much how it sounded like in the real game afterwards. It was around this time when I got really interested in like these service speakers and how to phone, like all this kind of technical equipment that I could experiment with. So I went on YouTube, I went on Twitter to find some inspiration, and that's when I found this girl called Reza Schwarzwald. She is amazing. A huge shout out to her as well. She made an accordion out of a Wii controller. Like I don't know quite how, but she took this controller, there's this wheel that she connected to Wise and she connected to Unity. Then she can play accordion. Fantastic, super meaningless and super silly, but fantastic as well. And I really loved that approach. So we were talking and we were jamming, and then at some point, then I asked her if she wanted to do a 100 house with me, and then she said, "Oh, you're saying it's a real house, like in the physical world, a real house." And I included this conversation here because it's a really good image on how we as game developers can be really focused on the digital world. Everything we do is somewhere up in the cloud, and it's hard to reach. But when you're doing 100 house in the physical world, then you can take all the knowledge you have with interactive audio and you can apply it differently in a setting like that, which was super fun. So that's what we did. There was some actors and some ghosts as well. And I took the learnings that I got from Back4blood. So I, for instance, had this surface speaker transducer in a metal locket that we hooked up with an Arduino motion sensor. So when people were walking by, then they would get a jump scare from the sound. It sounds something like this. Yeah. So this is pretty much just a sine wave going from high pitch to low pitch, but it works out really great. I also got a really long spring from Katrine. She gave me one that didn't have much sound to it. Like, she has a lot that huge and resonates a lot. But she gave me this because she thought, like, yeah, this is fine, but it's really hard to get good materials out of it. And she was right, it was really quiet, but then I bought a magnetic contact microphone that I could apply on the spring directly, and then it was like a whole new world with sounds opened up for me. That sounds something like this. Yeah, then also just went nuts with doing all kind of stuff with it. Yeah, and as you can see here, like some tiny touches can create some huge sounds with this contact microphone. It's invisible to the outer world, but you can only hear it with this microphone. And one of my favorite things is that I put a kalimba on it, so I have this spring reverb. We use that in the Haunted Horror House as well for the music. So that was a super fun session to do this Haunted Horror House, and it was in the car ride home from Køge when we were filled with this creative juice. We were really having fun. We were talking about this game that I made in Reaper. She loved the idea, and we were talking about how I did it, and we said, what if it's possible to make a game inside of Wwise? And how many of you know here what the Wwise is? Okay, there's some people. It's like some audio middleware that you can connect to Unity, you can connect it to Unreal. So it's not meant to create sounds, but it's meant to implement sounds. Instead of using Unity's audio engine, which is terrible, for instance, then you can have this that's much better, but it's also much more difficult. Then Reza came up with the idea of using the voice inspector. And this is here where it might get a bit technical, but let me go through it. So this is Wwise here. It looks something from 1995. It's old gray, and there's a lot of text. There's some hierarchy. There's not many images or colors. Like we have something here in what we call the voice monitor. And then we also have the voice inspector here, where we're able to do some things here. So it's mainly meant for profiling, and for bug fixing. You can see which sounds are playing here. We have some ambient woodlands. We have some reverb, pitch shift on, and these kind of things. So you can use it to see what sounds are active. But I thought if you turn it around, you can also choose which data that you want to put in there. So you can kind of see it as a game display. So here I have made a prototype of a game. It's super silly. There was one time I was really obsessed with this cookie clicker games, like this Paperclip Factory. I think this is a great game. So I made this game where you have to compete. You're the great country of Denmark. You are competing against the sad country of Sweden. So you have to get the most population by just clicking. And there's a citizen generator, there's an enemy generator. Yeah, that was a bit silly and it was a bit rough. But it was fun to make, but it didn't quite work as good. It didn't feel much as a game. Then I came up with the idea to have a whack-a-mole. So it's this game where you have some holes popping up at some random holes, and then you have to pop it down with your hammer. You have to whack it at the, and that's when I really cracked the code for how to make a game in Wwise, which when I think about it now is super silly to do, but I did make a game in Wwise. So I told Reza, I said, I made something truly crazy. Are you sitting down for this? I was hyped, she was hyped, because we were both super geeks who who really loved geeking out about these kind of things. So I showed her this video here, where you have the soundcaster, as we call it here. That's your hammer. So up in the voice inspector, you can see which mole you have to hit. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Then you have to hit the right one here. And it pops up at random. So you can see there's some information. There's the music, enjoy and listen to that. But for instance, number 3 mole, whack that. and here's some behind the scenes, so you can see that it's basically just a random music playlist container that was going on. Yeah, and if you are interested in that, I do have a blog post about it on the slide that doesn't work now. So I'm just gonna try to see if I can re-input my computer here. Yeah, just 2 seconds.
Okay. I got it.
But that's typical, like right 2 minutes before the finish line. There's nothing to do here. But yeah, so my point with that was really also to show. Oh, I actually think that is out of power, if I'm not mistaken. That's silly. Yeah. So the whole purpose with that is to show that it's okay to experiment with things, and it's okay to be playful. Like even like this is these silly, meaningless games here. They can turn into some great things. And I'm just gonna skip my computer here. Like I think it crashed. That's something that happens. But so I just want to say that in the end. Oh, wait a minute. Now we got it back. So 2 seconds. I can see my password. There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, and Reza loved it. She said make a blog post about it. That's what I did. So if you want to read about the details, then I wrote a blog post about on it, Audiokinetic here. And technical problems. And I do encourage you to download there's a GitHub project if you have Wwise and if you're interested in that, so you can try it out yourself. And I do dream of a day where there's a Steam library, but that's only for games in Wwise or only for games in Reaper. Or how about Word or Excel or Notion or something like that? There's so many possibilities. And what can we learn from all these wacky experiments that I have been doing? I think that by embracing a playful mindset, we can unlock our creativity, and we can ultimately push ourselves beyond of what we thought was possible. But normally it's only possible in collaboration with others. And as we've seen in this talk here, joining a community like Game Jams and reaching out to people that can give us valuable resources and connection, and by joining a community, we can learn the in and out of the industry. And what community is more welcoming than Nordic Game Jam? It's also important to use the community to find our own yes and partner, as I like to call it, to find our creative partners, and so we can overcome creative roadblock and find inspirations. And if you have the resources to it, I would highly recommend that you give back and build your own community. That you become a volunteer, or that you start some networks yourself. I have, for instance, started a game audio network here in Denmark, which is called Game Audio Playthrough, where every month have a new sound designer or composer in talking about a game that they have worked on, and it's usually a lot of fun, and it's great to see how it brings people together. And to round everything up, I just want to end this presentation with a quote from a wise man. He was my mentor at the GDC, a man named Daniel Nielsen. He framed it really well. He said, "Push yourself to the end of imagination. The rewards of the extreme will help define your results." And by these words, I just want to say thank you, and and happy jamming.